Super, super excited to have this conversation today on athletic recruiting. I know Jenny and I, we've been putting this together for the last couple of days, and this I'd say really is almost like an output of what you've been doing for the last several years, which I'm super excited to learn more about.
Yeah.
Um, so let me just kind of go into those who don't know who we are. We are an academic and college advising firm. We're local. We're here in the Bay Area. And our whole objective is to center this academic and college advising process around the student and not the college. I think success to us looks like happier students, less stressed families, and better admission outcomes. And the way that we do that is, again, our strategy centers on the student. We are super, super data driven. We are integrated in our communities and we know our schools and we support our schools. And we're very, very happy to do so. And then also, given COVID, there is, I'd say, certainly a need that we felt among our students for an in-person connection. And so we really strive, right, to build that in-person connection. So we're in person and not remote. So let's go into some bios. So for those who don't know Jenny, Jenny, please introduce yourself. We'd love to learn more about you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny or Jennifer Jameson. I have been involved in the sport of water polo since I was 10 years old. I fully committed at 10 after playing softball and some other sports. And in the last 22 years, I got the opportunity to play Division 1 in college, where I was an All-American. After that, I took into coaching. Um, Started coaching at some private schools out in Southern California. Decided that I wanted to pursue college coaching. Got to Pomona Pitzer. Really wanted to just be mentored by some of the best coaches out there, collegiate coaches and national team coaches too. Got the opportunity to go to Brown, coached at Brown for a little bit. Unfortunately, got cut short because of COVID. And then just in between that, I've been a director at some pretty notable clubs in the water polo community. Rose Bowl Aquatics is one of them. I was the head coach at Harvard Westlake School, which is a pretty big private school in LA. And since then, I've just been trying to use my knowledge with the recruiting process, especially, at these high academic schools, to help give that to athletes so we have more athletes playing in college. Myself, I was an under recruited athlete. I grew up in Ventura County, went to Rio Mesa High School. It's in the middle of strawberry fields. Nobody knows where it is. I had no idea about how the recruiting process worked. I was lucky enough to get noticed. This is a true story. I got noticed by my assistant coach's husband, who worked for the sheriff's department, and he saw my an article about me in the jail. And he went to his wife and he said that you should check this athlete out. So that's how I ended up playing Division 1 at Northridge. I was recruited, but I was technically a walk-on, because I did not get a scholarship right off the bat. Worked really hard and ended up getting a scholarship, ended up being an All-American. Had a pretty good career. But I want to help more athletes who were like me. And there's hundreds and there's thousands of other athletes who just get lost in the process because it is really confusing.
That's awesome. Yeah, we were when we were putting this deck together, Jenny and I were kind of thinking through like what could have been, right?
Yeah.
If only we had known more about this process.
Yeah.
Um, and it's funny because so yeah, so for those who don't know, I'm the owner of StrivePath. My name is Sunny. I'm also based out here in Orinda. Um, my background's healthcare, and before that, I was in finance. And I am not a recruit athlete. Instead, I was a five-letter athlete in high school, but then I was a walk-on for the rowing team at Cornell. But that's me. So with that, I'm looking forward to having this conversation. So let's just get started. So with just to kind of share what the objective is, right? Really, our whole goal here is I don't want for us to overload folks with information, but rather I'd rather we just provide clarity, right? How does college recruiting work? The intent is for us to also simplify this process. So what we're going to lay out for you is a step-by-step process. Now, the other thing we're going to do too is we're also going to highlight why you should be an athlete, right? In what scenarios would it make sense? And how does it vary based on the school slash division type? Now, since we are going to go through a timeline, I don't want that to stress anybody out. So, for example, if you're a junior and you just decided to pursue athletic recruiting, that's totally cool, right? What we are effectively laying out here is just more of like a step-by-step process. Sometimes we'll kind of stick with the timelines that we've suggested. Other times it's more condensed. It's all good, right? So we just want to, our whole goal is to kind of lay it out step by step and help from that perspective. So with that, let's get started. So I guess Jenny, when we think about what it's like to be an athlete, I think balance really comes to mind, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, you're a full-time student, full-time athlete. Now, obviously, it depends on the division that you're playing in.
Yeah.
But like what else can you share here that's important for people to know?
Yeah, I mean, when you get to the collegiate level, you're kind of on your own. You go from living with your parents and having a little bit of help on that end, and even though you have a experience at, on a smaller level of what it's like to be a student athlete, now you're doing it in a place where you are required to be in charge of your own time management.
Hmm.
So you have to figure out how to prioritize your classes, how to prioritize practice. And obviously, there's so many resources. Most schools and athletic programs, they have college or they have counselors who work specifically with the athletes so they can help kind of like guide them through what classes they need to take. But it gets a little bit more tough because you are on your own and you are a full-time student, and even if you're playing at the Division 3 level or you're playing in an Ivy League, you're still a full-time athlete as well.
Yep, exactly. And now, as we think about that balance, it's going to vary by school type,
Yeah.
right? And so what we've laid out here is we've laid out Division 1 through 3, and then the Ivies we have as a separate bucket, and we'll kind of go into why. And what really we want to call out first as we talk more about it is we want to call out the progression, right? So we'll talk about the training schedule, we'll talk about time during the off season, we'll talk about travel schedule, and then we'll talk about scholarship. So with that, yeah, Jenny, take us through this. So let's start with let's do Division 1, and we can kind of go row by row.
Yeah.
Cool.
Playing at the Division 1 level, you're expected to be playing at the highest level, and it's a lot more competitive. And I know we have some examples right here for Division 1 programs: UC Berkeley, Stanford, UT Austin. Um, the schools that are Division 1 schools, they have a really heavy training schedule. So even in the off season, in the summer, in the spring, whatever the season that the sport is in. And, I can use water polo for just an example. Um, Men's water polo is a fall season. So these Division 1 schools, Berkeley's a great example. They're three-time national champions. Um, they practice all year round. So they maybe take a couple weeks off just because they're required to. But they train all summer long because it goes right into their season. They'll have a break for the holidays, which is actually a good thing. And then they come back, and in January, February, they start training again. And that training schedule looks like 20 hours a week. And I do have to say this, it's 20 hours a week. Not all college coaches follow the NCAA rules of how many hours they can train. And what that looks like is weightlifting and whatever training it is for your sport. But the expectation is that you are committed to that training schedule year round. You're an athlete 11 to 11 and a half months out of the year.
Hmm. Wow, that's a lot.
It's a
Okay.
lot. Yeah.
But then as you go to Division 3, so if you go to like Division 2, I mean, it starts to get lighter.
It does get lighter, and honestly it is based on the school.
Hmm.
And we can talk about this more later when talk about communication with coaches, but
Yep.
there are questions that you can ask the coach. So if you're in communication with a Division 1 or Division 2 school, although the training hours that they're allotted is actually the same, some schools may not require you to have to stay over the summer. Obviously, the highly competitive schools like, the Stanfords, um, the Berkeleys, they're going to expect that. But, it is definitely program by program basis. And the Division 2 level, it is a little bit of less demanding schedule than Division 1.
Yep. And then, but like as we think about the summers, what's also important too to keep in mind is the summers can be used for other things, right? So
Yeah,
if you are, yeah, go for it.
actually, there's an athlete that my husband and I both coached. She plays at UC Davis,
Hmm.
and her coach allowed her to come home for the summer to
Cool.
be able to work. So, it does just depend on the program that you're at. Not every single coach is going to demand that you stay, but if there's things that come up, whether it's an internship or if you need to work or something that is outside the scope of athletics that's beneficial to your life, a lot of the times these coaches will understand and kind of let you go.
Yep. And so Division 1 through 3, we're seeing a progression, right, from heavy to lighter.
Yep.
We're seeing expected to train during the summer. Summer's off. We'll go into the Ivies last. Traveling almost every weekend. Here
Yep.
at Division 3, what you'll notice is travel schedule will vary by sport, season, location, and conference. So another example I think that you and I were talking about yesterday was Hawaii,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So Hawaii is a Division 1 program. They're in the Big West Conference
Yep.
with, yeah, UCSB, UC Davis. They have to travel all the time. They may have a conference tournament every, oh gosh, I don't know, every 4 years or something like that. And they do, just depending on the flip flop of the schedule. Typically, they'll play away one year, then play at home. So when they're in season and they have a women's water polo team, they don't have a men's team, but the women's season is incredibly long. It's from the end, I guess, well, for a Division 1 program like that, it's from the beginning of January all the way to halfway through May.
Yep.
So from that time, they're on a plane traveling a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, and then the last category, and then we'll touch on the Ivies, is scholarships. Now we're going to touch on this towards the end, right, when we start talking about NCAA caps or like the changes in the regulations. But I think really like the headline is as you go from Division 1 to Division 3, you go from most scholarship money to none.
Yes. Yeah. So now, with the new NCAA rules with scholarships and roster caps, they're essentially, the NCAA is essentially allowing Division 1 programs to be able to fill scholarships for every single roster spot. That is only going to be, it just depends on the school, whether the school
Hmm.
is funded or not. There's kind of a lot of question marks with that. And then with Division 2 programs, that rule doesn't apply to Division 2, Division
Hmm.
or Ivy League schools. So the Division 2 schools will have probably less scholarships or be a lot more limited than the Division 1 programs.
Cool. And then we've got like this weird beast called the Ivies.
Yes.
Um, Now in some ways they're kind of like a blend between like Division 3 and Division 1.
Yes.
But are they Division 1? Like what are they?
Yeah, so they're technically Division 1 programs. The Ivy League has its own own NCAA set of rules. So, all of the compliance meetings that I went to when I was at Brown, it's all Ivy League, NCAA. So it is not the same as normal Division I schools. Um, you know, if do you want me to go into the training schedule?
Yeah,
Kind
yeah,
of
go.
like
Oh, yeah. I mean, go for it.
yeah, so Division III schools, you're required to play in season. Um, they're given a set of hours that you can practice in the off season, but it's significantly less than Division I schools, and they're not
Mhm.
allowed to practice in the summer. The Ivy Leagues are actually the same way. So the Ivy Leagues are given an allotted amount of hours that they're allowed to practice in the preseason, and then, in season, that's when you're expected to be fully committed, and then they can't practice in the summer as well. The thought process behind that is obviously it's an Ivy League school, so they want these students to be students and then athletes. So it's not athlete first, student first. The coaches and the schools encourage the athletes to do internships in the off season. Starting their sophomore year, they can go study abroad.
Yeah.
When I was we had a lot of the women's athletes, they studied abroad in the fall and then they came back and played. Over the summer, most of the guys went and did internships in whatever major that they were doing. So you're still, the hard part is that you are still required to play at a high level. So you are still competing with Division I programs that
Yep.
practice all year round. But again, your schedule is more limited. And
Yep.
for, I think now I've seen just in water polo, I've seen there be such a boost in the quality of athlete that has gone to Ivy League schools. When I was in
Yeah.
college, uh, I graduated 2014. When I was in college, the Ivies were terrible. And now, the women's and the men's programs are competing with the Stanfords, the UCLA's, the Cals. It's definitely changed because students are figuring out that, sometimes the sport ends
Yeah.
and they have an avenue after that.
Yep. And actually, so for those who are yeah, for those who are watching, also check out the perspective that we have with Will Pelton, who was on the swim team over at UC Berkeley. And he'll share with you how it was both the athletic and the academic component, which is why he actually chose to swim at Cal. So let's keep going. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to go through let's go through why do it. And then we're going to go through the steps. And I want to make sure we kind of get to this pretty quickly so that we're efficient with time. But now why do it? So like, I think obviously if you enjoy the game, if you want to excel at competition, you genuinely love the sport, right? But another reason it's a solid pathway for college admissions.
Yep.
Provided, of course, that the other conditions are met. We're going to talk about the academic conditions later in the presentation. And the last thing too is many athletes actually drop out of sports programs to focus on other aspects of college. So a great
Yep.
example is I rowed at Cornell. A lot of the rowers, who were recruited to row at Cornell, like they dropped out. My wife was actually recruited to run at Columbia. She dropped out
Yeah.
of the
And
program.
my freshman class, we had 12 and we graduated with five.
Yeah,
So I know Northridge is not a super high academic school, but we a lot of girls got there and they're like, this is too much, and
yeah,
I'm here in school, so I might as well pursue other avenues.
yep. Now,
Yeah.
the thing to note though is, and this is more, I think, the exception than the rule, but if you're like a highly recruited D1 athlete, the key thing to keep in mind would be there may be scholarship money tied, right, to you being on that team. And so you dropping out would actually have like some level of consequences there. But if you're like doing D3 or IVs, like there's really no financial repercussions. Is that fair?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
That's
All right.
100% correct.
Let's now do the timeline overview. So I'm just going to plop this up for a second, and then we're going to now drill through each one of these steps. So what we have here, by the way, is we've got the step, and then we've also got the suggested timeline. By no means is this prescriptive. This is a suggested timeline. So If you've realized junior year you want to go after this, all great. You've got to go through the same steps, just a bit more condensed. So the first step is talk to your coach, right? They've witnessed your progression. They can share more about what it takes to get recruited. And they've also got the experience. Like they've actually seen what it takes to get recruited um, by D1, D2, D3 schools. So they can help you set realistic goals and expectations. Anything you should add?
Yeah, I mean, I think having a conversation with whether it's your high school coach or your club coach, I think it should be someone that you really trust. I have seen in the past that there are athletes that have the capability of playing in college, but sometimes the coach that they may have might not see that. So someone that you feel like is investing into you and, for you, vice versa, have an honest conversation with them and ask them, where do you see my athletic progression in the next couple of years? And do you think that I could play collegiately at any level?
Yeah. But now let's say that you just joined the high school team
Mhm.
and that coach doesn't know who you are. What do you do?
So if you're in a position where you're like, hey, I just want to try the sport, that first year, just see if it's something that you like and it's something that you want to invest time into. And if it's something that you want to invest time into, that's when you can start having conversations with your coaches of what clubs you can play for, how you can get better. And then if you and your coach feel like you have the opportunity to go play in college, that's when you can start your recruiting process. And that kind of goes back to the timeline of when you should start. There really is no right answer, right or
Yeah.
wrong answer of when you can start. If you're halfway through your junior year and you're like, I think I'm good at this sport and I can play in college, it's not too late.
Yeah. And we also grow at our own rates,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so some people like they mature a lot later in high school. Totally cool.
yeah,
The other thing too to do here is to register with the
yep,
NCAA. And so for those who might find this helpful, so here's a quick little link. We can send this across actually for folks, but this will actually kind of walk you through the different types of eligibility types. And then I think actually, yeah, here it is. So if you are unsure which division you want to compete in, you can create a profile page account. So we would suggest just get this up and running.
yeah.
So let's actually go through the rest. And I think I just lost my, there we go. Cool. Okay, step two, start to post your athletic stats. So, and you'll notice that we said look for a relevant, not many sites where you can post your stats. Don't go overboard. And so we've got some examples of different places, and we've actually seen some of our students, post their stats here as well. So SwimCloud's actually pretty popular among our swimmers. And I think one that you come across is Maps Preps and
Max Prep.
Huddle, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Max Preps is a big one. Most high school programs will post their schedule on there and then they'll keep track of stats. So, you know, for me as a high school coach, our program actually did that for the athletes. So they didn't have to do it for themselves. They should do that. Not everybody will. But it is a good place to keep track of your stats even if it's not something that you end up sending to the coaches, just for you to have them on record. And if you just want to highlight a couple things, you can just take that and put it in your resume so the coaches can see, a quick blip about how amazing you are and how successful of a year you had without looking through a lot of stats.
Yep. And then now with the metrics that are relevant to your sport, would that be your coach who tells you what metrics are relevant? Like, how do you figure that piece out?
Yeah, yeah, that would be
Okay.
for yeah.
Yeah. Like I would imagine for swimming, it's obviously times and height, but like I would think like maybe like hand size could be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think when you put in certain factors, and it obviously depends on the sport, but your height, depending on the sport, your weight, what your shoe size is, I don't think that that is like information that will hurt you because, if I'm looking at it from a recruiting perspective, if I'm kind of going back and I get an email of from a sophomore who's saying, I am a 5'10", and for a women's water polo player, I'm a 5'10", 180-pound center. I'd be like, oh man, like this is a girl that I want to see play. Like I want to see what she looks like. I want to see how she moves in the water. So those metrics based on your sport, I think it's important to tell the coaches because it can also help catch their eye.
Yep, totally. Like if volleyball players, height, right?
Yep.
Basketball as well, it depends on the position, but
Sure.
ask your coaches for sure. And then also ask them um, the platform. Now, a quick note actually about that is you had this great point. So share more about this.
Yeah, so something that I've seen, and this is a change for me too, because I'm not super savvy on social media. I have an Instagram myself, and that's it. But I've noticed that a lot of athletes are using Instagram and X to make accounts with video clips and everything, and it's not a bad thing. So if you do already have that, don't go and delete it. You can keep it, but my advice is that you want to keep it simple. Um, when you send clips to coaches, YouTube is just a great platform to copy and paste the link in the email. A lot of coaches are lazy and they don't want to go searching for information. And that's just the truth. I know that I am guilty of that. I've gotten emails where there's 5 different links to things, and I'm just like, I'll look at it later. And then look at it later. And it's just it happens sometimes. It's the reality. So if it is right in front of their face and oh, here's if it's volleyball, here's a set from my game last week against so and so, the coaches are going to click on that and watch it right away. Right away.
Yep.
So if you have an Instagram or an X account and there are coaches that communicate with you through that, that's great. It's not black and white one way or the other, but some of these coaches are old school. And email is the best way to contact them.
It's also just a really good way for you to be efficient with your time, right? Because
Yes.
high school is not going to be not busy.
Yeah.
You got a lot of other priorities too, like
Yeah.
making sure that you do well academically too. Um, so one question that we quickly got actually is, do you recommend Instagram and X, or can you do just one? I think we actually talked about this yesterday. I think you go for it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Instagram is probably the easiest platform to use if you're posting videos just because
Hmm.
of the way that it's set up. But again, I don't want to give the wrong information. It really just depends on the sport. I've kind of learned that football is actually pretty active on X.
Yeah,
So it really is up to you. Again, emails are the best.
yeah,
Emails and calls. If you're able to get on the phone with a coach, it's way better than communicating through a social media platform.
yep. And then we'll talk about when you can actually get in touch with coaches,
Yeah.
which I think it's like in two steps. So, but really, I think just to kind of recap what Jenny said. So, um, yeah, I think like, Instagram X, they're great for sure. Um, I think one source of was like one area that one person you could ask could be like your current coaches, because they can certainly tell you, right? They can tell you which coaches have recruited from your program and
Mhm.
what platforms they've recommended. But at the same time, like I think it's better just to kind of keep it simple and almost like focus on the highlight reel first,
Yep.
right? And then create like the then create like the player profile, which will go into next before we think about Instagram or X. Is that fair?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so now highlight reels.
Yeah. So your highlight reel is actually pretty crucial. I think one mistake that I've seen a lot of athletes make is they send a 10-minute highlight reel with, you know, with music and everything, and it's great, but coaches aren't going to watch 10 minutes of that. Um, so just a couple points that are here. You want to show the coaches your capabilities, your skill, in a short amount of time. A highlight reel of 2 to 3 minutes is perfect. Having context of who you are in the pool, if you're able to edit it, or there are some places that can do editing for you to be able to point you out. What scenario it's in, be
Hmm.
very clear. And then one of the biggest things that I always tell athletes is don't send a highlight reel or video against a team that is terrible. Coaches notice that. So, if I'm just speaking from water polo's perspective, if I see a highlight reel of 50 goals and the goalie can't move, I'm like, okay, that doesn't show me a whole lot. Like coaches want to see how you play at a competitive level, and to be honest, they want to see you in a successful light, but also how you can be challenged. So in the highlight reel, make it short and sweet. Try and have some um, difference in some having it not be the same skill over and over again. If it's
Like
a
same
goal
situation, you mean, as well?
situation, yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. um or you can do that, and you can also send just a quarter. Send
Mhm.
a quarter where you feel like you played really well, a set, an inning. For sports that are time based, send a couple clips of races that you have. uh they do want to see that too. So even if you can send a highlight reel, they want to see how you actually play. And that's really important too for a lot of the schools that are out of state and can't see you in person all the time. Um, Being able to give them game updates is really good. It's really helpful.
Yeah. And then I think for those who are, um, for those who race, so if you're a swimmer or if you're a runner, right? Obviously there are no real like call it game situations, right? But there are races that you could totally
Yeah.
record and send those across. So this is, I think, really just a call to action for parents. One, have a decent camera. So if you have a really old iPhone, maybe think about upgrading it. And then the second is, yeah, like if you're, seeing your student at a meet, record, right? Because it might be the one where they just absolutely crush it, and that's the one that you want to put in their highlight reel.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Awesome.
even coaches see technique in sports
Yep.
like that. Like running and swimming are extremely technical sports. So, you know, those coaches have an eye for, okay, this athlete is really good with this technical skill. I can make them better.
Yep.
Um, so it's just it's helpful even if you're not playing a team sport.
That's great. That's great insight. Okay, step 4, create a wide list of college targets. So here, what we've done so far is we've built almost like a digital presence, right? Now we're starting to think about how do we cast a wide net?
Mhm.
And at this point, this is still sophomore year, so we don't really know like what colleges we want to apply to versus ones that we don't. And so the objective is just like think more broadly. Your college preferences may actually also change as you progress through high school, right?
Yep.
And so as you think about the different colleges, one, your coaches can certainly help here.
Yeah.
There are also, we can obviously help too. There are also a few different online resources you can use. Like you can use like Runcruit for those who are in track, where you can post your stats. It can tell you like, how competitive you are for various programs. So create a wide list of college targets because that'll actually kind of then set you up for like who you're going to reach out to in step 5, step 6. What else do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, be open-minded.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've seen a lot is that a lot of athletes at a young age, which is great. I think that it's really important to have goals, but their first thought is, I want to be a Division 1 athlete. Okay, that's that is not something that you can't do. But be open-minded. Be open-minded to exploring Division 2 programs, Division 3 programs. That you never know, things change. I've had athletes who wanted to play Division 1, and then their senior year, they're like, you know what? I love the sport. I want to keep playing it, but I don't want to do it all the
Yep.
time. I'm going to go to a Division 1 program. And these are like high level athletes too. So be open minded when you kind of cast out that net. Don't limit it to just schools where, if you're thinking the Division 1 route, um, have some kind of like safety programs too. And again, like things change, and your path might be different than what you think it's going to be from the beginning.
Totally. Love that. Step 5, create a resume slash player profile. So this is a really important. So, I mean, by the way, we still haven't contacted coaches yet, right? So we are still getting everything ready to do before we do the contacting.
Yeah, this is
Um,
this is the hardest part.
yeah,
I tell athletes that all the time. The hard part is not sending the emails and, obviously having the conversations. It may be a little nerve-wracking, but the hardest part is getting all of this information together. And once that's done and the door is open, it's a different kind of hard, but just gathering all the information is just like a key component before you start reaching out to coaches.
yep. And you'll actually notice here, so obviously there's like professional photo, like relevant metrics, which we talked about,
Yeah.
academic performance.
Yep.
And we'll go into why, but just a quick sneak peek. Coaches need to know that you can actually pass the academic bar that admissions is set, right? Because if you can't, they can't recruit you.
Yep.
And so it's important to know that you're progressing along academically. So that's very important. And then one thing that you really almost put like multiple exclamation points behind was when you put coach contact details, make sure you include their email and their cell.
Yep. Yeah, because a lot of these college coaches, especially if each community of sport is small.
Yep.
Um, a lot of people know each other, and again, put someone that you trust. Um, but they're gonna call the coach and say, "Hey, what do you think about this player? Is this someone who is worth talking to?" And I think something to remember too, and this is kind of a hard thing to say, um, the relationship with the coaches, the high school coaches, club coaches, with the college coaches is, unfortunately, it's more important than just the individual. So you have to expect that when you put the whoever you want as your reference, you have to expect that they're going to be honest with this coach about how they see you fitting into their program, because they want to keep that relationship open. They don't want to send someone who may not be able to kind of keep up, or just may not be the right fit, because they want them to continue to recruit their athletes. So that's, it may seem like a harsh thing, but it is the reality. So just expect that the coach that you put down as a reference, they are going to be honest for better or for worse.
Which is why I think like the very first step that we had in this process was to talk to your coach,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? Like align on like what your goals are, like see what realistic expectations they can set. See how like you and I talked about one student yesterday, and the question was ask your coach how they can help develop you,
Yep.
right? That stuff is very important. So you want to make sure your coach is obviously invested in your development, but they're also not, I'd say that they're being realistic with you.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's a great piece of insight.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. We still haven't sent out coaches. We still haven't sent out anything to coaches yet. Now we're just preparing emails. And this is also really important too. So okay, so let's talk about preparing the emails.
Mhm. Yeah. Email, short and sweet. So all the information that they really need to see is in your transcript, your class schedule, your video, and your academic and athletic resume. So when you send the email, it should only be a paragraph.
Mhm.
Hey coach, stroke their ego a little bit. Congratulations on the win. If they're in season, congratulations on the win against so and so. If we're talking about an Ivy League, hey, uh, Coach so and so at Harvard, congrats on the win against Princeton this weekend. I was able to watch it online. I'm really excited to see what you guys do in the future. Um, my name is blank blank. I am a whatever year you are, and I'm interested in the program because of this, and that. One of just for example, I think one of the biggest ones that was really like a eye catching for us at Brown is when students came to us and said, I'm really interested in open curriculum. When
Mm.
athletes come in and say, I really, really want to pursue the open curriculum, we're like, okay, they want to go to Brown. They don't want to go to Harvard. They don't want to go to Princeton. So being personal about it and why you're interested in the school, it will help the coaches feel like, okay, this athlete really knows why they want to go here, and it's worth my time to talk to them. You don't want to send a page email. It really only has to be a paragraph. At the end of the email, attached is everything. So on that email, you attach, like I said, your transcripts, your current class schedule that may be on your transcripts already,
Yep.
um, a link to your video, and your academic athletic resume. So then they can just, click on your resume. They have all the information there. They can click on your YouTube link. They can watch you, and then they can respond to you.
Yep. And now just to highlight the time. So it's around sophomore year spring.
Yep.
So by this point, I mean, let's just say it's like around February, you probably have already picked your courses for junior year.
Yep.
And so you're in a pretty good spot to send these out. One thing that we were talking about is what about those who are in freshman year? Can they still do this or is that too early?
Um, you can, but I recommend starting your sophomore year.
Yeah.
Just because if you're a freshman and you start sending out emails as a freshman, coaches won't look at it. They'll look at sophomores because what they do is, and we'll talk about this, but coaches can't have communication with you until, and this is just email, phone communication. They can't have communication with you until June 15th going into your junior year.
Yep.
So as a sophomore, they already can't talk to you. As a freshman, they definitely can't talk to you. So as a freshman, if you send those emails, it'll get just completely ignored. And you don't want to have to like come back your sophomore year. It's better to come back your sophomore year because those coaches are compiling a list of athletes for that year. Um, and to me, to some people, it may seem surprising, but they're trying to look at what their class is going to look like 3 years in advance because they have to.
Yep. Yep. So now we're contacting coaches.
Mhm.
And there are a couple of links we want to there are a couple of links I'm gonna showcase as well. But so the point that you made was um, you send these out, right? And there's a good chance it won't even be the head coach who responds. It'll be the assistant coach, which means you should contact the entire coaching staff.
Everybody. So you
Yeah.
can it to the head coach, but CC all the assistants. The
Yep.
assistants just do a majority of the recruiting portion, and they do most of the recruiting until it gets to the point where the head coach makes a decision. Or if
Yep.
there's who the head coach is really interested in and is like, I need to get this guy, he'll or girl, he'll communicate with you directly. But if you get a response from the assistant coach, don't be discouraged.
And then the other thing too was to complete each school's recruiting questionnaire.
Mhm.
So why don't I help try to find one while you talk about what it is?
Okay. So the recruiting questionnaire is just a like basic questionnaire that they have on each athletics website,
Hmm.
underneath the specific sport that you play. It'll be like if we're looking right here, um, it'll
Let's
be
just do water polo because it was. Oh,
yeah,
it's right there.
recruiting questionnaire. You click on that. You fill out all the information that you need. Like right here, this is great. It has all of the sports.
Yep.
And it goes directly to the database that the coaches use to be able to collect information. So it's really helpful for them and it's helpful for you because even though you email them, you're actually popping up on their list of contacts for, you know, their 2027 class that they're trying to fill,
Yep.
So
Yeah. And
and
if anything, what was that?
most coaches will ask you to do that. So if you email them, they'll say, hey, like, thanks for
Yep.
reaching out about our questionnaire.
Yeah.
So
And like, I mean, for those who've worked in sales, I think one thing that we want to drive home is like this is actually a bit of a sales process, right? And by you filling out the recruiting questionnaire, you're kind of entering that coach's like CRM, right?
yeah. Yep.
And so that's why it's super helpful.
Yep.
Okay, now this is also a step when a lot of things can go wrong, right? You can have like spelling mistakes, you can mention the wrong school. So do not blanket send,
Yes.
right? Make
Yeah.
sure each email is truly reflective of that school and you double checked it. Um, and now you've sent these out, coaches can't respond to you till until June 15th.
Yeah. So if you are a sophomore, coaches can't respond to you in conversation. So you'll probably get an email back. Either you won't get an email back or you'll get an email saying, dear so and so, thank you for your interest. Due to NCAA rules, we can't speak to you until June 15th. Fill out our recruiting questionnaire. We look forward to speaking to you further. A lot of coaches will respond just kind of giving you that spiel. That doesn't mean to stop emailing them.
Yep.
So they're still watching you. So, if we're talking about volleyball when Junior Olympics comes up, if you're uh, a, a sophomore who's going to be a rising junior, the coaches want to see and know who you are because it sounds silly, but they're lurking in the background watching you see
Hmm.
how to play because, again, they're already looking at that class that you're in. So if you're a sophomore, please email them, keep emailing them, update them on your schedule, let them know how you're doing, give them more video. Hey coach, I heard you're recruiting at this tournament. I'm going to be playing here at this time. I'm number 8. I look forward to seeing you, and they might show up. So it's important, like, even when you send that initial email to them, you keep following up because then once June 15 hits, you can actually start having some email conversation with them.
Yep. Exactly. Um, okay, so now the dating game. So now it's June 15th, after sophomore year, and we're now going through junior year. And so step 7 and step 8
Yeah.
almost occur like over the course of a full year. And the thing to keep in mind, by the way, is just as how you or your student is casting a very wide net, so are coaches,
Yeah.
right? And so they may respond to you here, they may not respond to you for several months, they may totally ghost you, right? So take that in stride, don't take it personally. Um, and they can also respond via phone or email. But yeah, so like what is, because you're helping some students through this right now, like what is this process like?
Yeah, it's really hard. I know I said that the emailing was the hardest part, but this is kind of it gets tough mentally,
Yeah.
right? June 15 hits, you get these emails and you get a bunch of calls, and honestly, you may not hear anything. And I had an athlete who I've known since he was 12, and when June 15th came around of his junior year, I talked to his dad, and his dad's like, we got nothing. And he's like a really highly recruited athlete now. He wasn't at first. And he goes to a really notable school, plays for a great program, and they were like, wait a second. And then there's athletes who are, I would say middle of the road Division 1 athletes who are getting phone calls from Cal, Stanford, and it's just a phone call, right? So that's something to remember, is that when they reach out to you, it may seem overwhelming and exciting, and you may get a lot of communication, you may not get any. But that whole year of your junior year, it will go up and down. You'll
Yeah.
get some communication, you might not hear from them for a couple months, you might all of a sudden hear from them again. And things shift and change, and it's just it's really important to remember that this is your path too. And try, I think for like especially the fall portion of your junior year, try not to read into things too
Yeah.
much or get too high or too low. Because like I said, things change really quickly, and a lot of programs don't actually uh, choose their class for your the year that you graduate until you're in your senior year anyway. Um,
Hmm.
so it's just this is a big communication year. This is when you have to talk to coaches a lot. You have to do a lot of outreach. You got to go up to them, shake their hand, say hello. I know it's nerve-wracking, but they if you really want to go to these schools or if you're really interested in them, you have to put yourself out there.
Yep. And then the other thing too is even if you haven't heard from them, like don't stop on like the monthly updates, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Because who
that's a lot.
knows, yeah, who knows why they're not responding? Like there may be a stat that you post like month 6 that really catches their eye, like stay persistent.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Now we're on on-campus visits. So there are two types. There's official and then there's unofficial, and there's still like I'd say June 15th after sophomore through junior year. Um, so I guess there's a limit, right, for the official visits?
Yeah, so official visits are 5 visits. And I will say this, I would say probably around like 90% of athletes don't go on all 5 visits. So don't be freaked out if you get invited on 2 official visits. That's actually like a really great thing. Again, like I think football is a little bit different if you're at like a really, notable high level program. They'll A bunch of schools will invite you and schmooze you and do the pictures and all that, but for the most part athletes won't take all 5, so you're
Mhm.
allowed to take 5 official visits. That's funded by the school. They provide lodging for you. You'll probably stay in the dorms, or it just kind of depends. You'll stay with athletes to kind of see what it's like there, what the culture is, meet with the coaches, and that is, that's up to the coach on if they want to invite you on an official visit. If you get invited on an official visit, I would say it's pretty serious, and they want you to be a part of their program.
Yep. And they'll use that to maybe even um like for football, like talk about your like your future on the team. Like what
Yep.
could that look like, right? Um and then there's unofficial, which is unlimited and the school doesn't pay for anything. Like do you tell coaches that you're still visiting if it's unofficial?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple things you can do. If you're visiting the school on your own, you can reach out to the coach, and I always
Yep.
recommend this. If you're in your junior year, you're going on an East Coast trip and you're going to go hit a bunch of different schools that you're interested in. Contact the coaches and let them know, because most of the time they'll sit down and meet with you for 15 or 20 minutes. And even though that's not technically an unofficial visit, you get some FaceTime.
Yep.
Um, Unofficial visits are actually Division 3 programs have to do unofficial visits.
So now here's an important note, right? So while this is all happening, I think a few things. So you're in your junior year, which is a really critical year. One, it's important to remain level-headed, which can be really hard. Um, so parents, I think this is like this is a great area where you can support your student. Secondly, it'll be important to remain persistent with those monthly outreaches. But thirdly, it's important to also make sure that, you continue to prioritize your grades. The reason why is, and you can see here, we've listed something called the Student Academic Index. So the SAT and the academic scores. So like the Ivies actually use this as an example. They'll combine the two, and the coaches will typically kind of they'll run like your score and your courses by admissions to kind of make sure that you can pass their bar.
Yeah.
If you don't pass their bar, you won't get the green light. for admissions. And so therefore the coaches can't recruit you. And so even as part of like the recruiting process in your junior year, coaches will actually ask you for your transcript and they'll say like, hey, I want to run this by admissions. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's why it's important just to send them your transcript
Yeah.
already. You know, I'll just use for, Pomona for an example. Like we had a liaison for the school for both Pomona and Pitzer, who we would send all the academic information to them, and they would come back to us with a pre-read to let them know where they would fit academically with the school. Schools like that are hard because um, there are certain situations where if you're a really good athlete and you're an okay student, you're able to get by. But with schools that are on the higher academic side, that's not really the case.
Step nine, the commit. So now we're looking at junior year, senior year, fall. So like I'd say spring, junior year to senior year, fall. Coaches may indicate if they want you on the team, and it's a verbal commit, but remember it's a verbal commit, right?
Commit is a verbal commit. So, I mean, it goes both ways. The coaches can take the verbal commitment away, and you can also decommit from the school. So, something that we put here is I would recommend not to publicize it.
Yeah.
I know it's really exciting. I completely understand. I know there's also a lot of pressure on kids these days to show that they're committed. But I would keep that on a more private level just because you never know what's going to happen until it's a done deal and, you know, you're signing your NIL. NIL would be great too, but you're you're signing your NLI. I would just kind of, keep your eyes straight on the road until it's done.
Yeah. Awesome. And so you'll get to that stage where, if you're applying to a school with an early decision policy, they may say, hey, apply here early and you're in,
Yes. Yep. Yeah,
right?
and that's like the Ivy League process. So
Yep.
they'll say we want you, go ED1, and for that, it's you're in unless you completely mess up academically. So
Yep.
it's when you just have to make sure that when they say, "Hey, I want you to go to ED1," and you're in the school, you can't just sit back and relax. You got to finish strong.
Yep. Awesome. So I know we're going a little bit over. We're actually almost done. So this is a bit of like a hot topic. So the before I talk about this too much, the thing to keep in mind is coaches are effectively making a case to recruit you, right? So in other words, they're given a designated number of spots for like designated number of admission slots. Um, what'll make their case for you a little bit tougher is if they have to allot a spot and financial aid for you.
Yeah.
And so needing financial aid may impact your ability to get recruited. But if you do need financial aid, say so, right? What we don't want to happen is you get in and you can't afford it, and that creates significant family hardship. So it's rather that you just be open and honest about financial aid need. But if you don't need it, it will actually, I'd say, lessen the burden of proof that that coach has to provide to kind of get you in the door.
Yeah, and I would say that that definitely applies more to like smaller
Yeah,
liberal arts colleges that are really expensive Division 3 programs that don't have the ability to give athletic scholarships. They'll want to know right off the bat, what's your financial situation. And it just depends. I think something that I've had athletes that I've worked with before, and they're like, well, should I tell them I don't need any financial aid? And I just tell them, yes, that should be one of the first things you tell them. One of the first things you should tell them is, I do need financial aid or I don't need financial aid, because that's going to also be able to help kind of gauge where your process will be with their program.
yep. And then for those who aren't sure if you're going to need it or not, we would suggest conduct a net price calculator exercise. For those who are StrivePath student family clients, like If you don't know what that is, like let us know, and your consultant will send you 4 links to check out. Cool. It effectively helps you kind of assess like your need before you even apply. Okay. Quick note about NCAA changes, and we're pretty much done. So roster caps and scholarships, you talked about this at the beginning. What is this?
Yeah, so there's a big lawsuit with the NCAA. It's just another one. Not surprising, but it changed the whole landscape of Division One schools. So you'll see some changes in the next, I would say, week or so, because basically what happened is that the schools, for some sports, it's different. You can look it up, and there will be a list of the schools that will show the amount of allowed athletes on the roster in comparison to what they're allowed now. And this is all scholarship based. So a lot of it has to do with like the NILs and everything that's just been incorporated into college sports now. But now for sports, like I'll use water polo for example, there was no cap on rosters. So you take a program like USC is able to have 38 people on their roster. They can gatekeep these like 12 athletes who are, good enough to play at other Division One programs, but they're never going to play. They're going to sit on the roster. They're going to go to USC now. And so if we're talking about men's and women's, so women's programs had 8 scholarships. Men's programs had 4.5 scholarships. So that's only if the school is fully funded. If the school is fully funded, they'll have 8 full scholarships, 4.5 that they can spread out between all of the athletes that are on the program. Now, essentially, what they're doing is they're capping the roster, regardless of red shirt, gray shirt. It doesn't matter, to 24 athletes. They have to have 24 athletes. But the school or the NCAA is now allowing them to give 24 scholarships. But
Mhm.
that also depends on the school. So if we're talking about like a smaller Division One program, like say UC Irvine, right? Um, UC Irvine is probably not a fully funded school athletically. So
Mhm.
now the school gets to decide, do we want to stay Division One or do we want to go to Division Two? And they actually have until the end of this month to be able to decide that.
Mhm.
Stay Division One, it doesn't mean that they get 24 scholarships. So the school will be in charge of allocating that money to whatever sports they want to invest in. There's a lot of articles on it online, but one of the things that was brought up is that Olympic sports are probably going to be the sports that take the biggest hit from it, just because they don't create a lot of revenue for the school. This also
Mhm.
means it could mean budget cuts for coaches' salaries too. So there's a lot of different things that can happen from this. But now, with Division One programs, there are more scholarships. It just depends on the school, but now they have to keep the roster at a certain amount. They can't keep extra people. So even I believe football is 105 now, but they can't have anyone extra. They can't have anyone like kind of sitting on the roster who doesn't play for 4 years.
That they
And
just recruited so that they wouldn't play somewhere else. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it USC is a tough example because of all the stuff that happened there with the varsity blues. But I it creates more parity for other Division One programs because now you have these athletes who could get recruited by these schools, maybe not play, but now they're going to go to another school, which creates, in my opinion, it creates more parity in the competition across the board. But
Love it.
let's keep in mind this is going to be active as of the 2025-26 academic year. So it's not the spring semester of 2025. It starts at the academic year.
Yep. So quick note, I did get a request for the timeline slide, so I can quickly just flash that up again. And then by the way, for StrivePath client families, we will actually be making this available on Notion, so don't worry about that. But if you want, take a screenshot. We're also going to record this too, so don't fret. But yeah, so this kind of so speak with coach, register with NCAA, build online presence. Sophomore year, speak with coach. NCAA, build online presence. But then college list, email coaches. Coaches can't respond until June 15th. Coach correspondence, on-campus visits, applications. Okay. Now let's go to the last slide. Parting thoughts. So, if anything, um, one, we hope that this process has been a little bit simplified, right? Of course, you're going to have different metrics for different sports, right? But just broad strokes wise, like this is kind of how it runs for pretty much every sport. And the recruiting piece, it's really a sales process, right? And it does require significant time. It obviously means you've got to master the sport, means you got to continue to be a student. Plus, you have to invest time in the recruiting process. And so this means discipline, persistence, resilience, and then what we talked about at the very, very start of this presentation, balance, right? And expect to get ghosted by coaches because they are also running their own sales process. But so it may seem daunting. We're here to help. Um, and honestly, just creating a project plan will help as well. So honestly, if you love the sport, pursue it. When we started this conversation, the whole thing with that Jenny and I were talking about is like, what could have been, right? Had we known this process, things could have been different, right? But if you love the sport, pursue it, right? And we kind of hope I'd say, outlining this process makes your life a little bit easier. So, Jenny, parting thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really hard process. And I hope that your coaches are helpful in it. Sometimes they're not, and that makes it difficult to be able to navigate through it. But, I it sounds so silly, but I tell a lot of the athletes that I've coached when things don't work out the way that they want, everything happens for a reason. And,
Yep.
me, the what could have been, it's fun to think about, but everything happened for a reason. My experience is something that I appreciate. Being a college athlete, I think is one of the key points of my growing, just from like, I would say adolescence into a young adult. It taught me a lot of different skills to be able to navigate through life. And, you know, unless you're playing a professional sport, it ends, and I think that being able to pursue that in college, it'll help you with the tools to be able to get through
Yep.
really hard situations. And I know you know that too, but it's something that, if you love the sport and you are invested, absolutely pursue it. I think that there are way too many athletes out there who have the idea that they want to do it, but think that they're not good enough,
Yep.
who actually can play in college. So, be patient with yourself, give yourself some grace. It is a difficult process, and, everything does happen for a reason, and it works out the way that it's supposed to. And as long as you kind of remind yourself and accept that, then your path will kind of just show itself.
Awesome. Well, I know we are way past the hour. Let's leave it for maybe like 3 minutes for Q&A. And then while people ask questions, um, thanks all for joining. That's our contact information. So if you'd like to learn more, please don't hesitate to reach out. I do have a quick favor actually. If folks can just like um, sign up to follow us on Facebook, we can actually do Facebook Lives, which would be awesome. But as I do this, questions, questions, questions. I'll just send this in the chat for folks. Any questions so far? Nope.
Well, cool.
Going once, going, actually, while we wait for questions. So one thing, about the discipline piece. One of so with rowing, I was like, I'm just gonna give it a try. I'm gonna give it a shot, right? And turns out like I had like the lung capacity of a whale, which is what the coach said. And so, but one of the things that sold me on it was the rowers had mentioned it actually helped their GPA
Yeah. Yeah.
because it helped, right? Because you've got like a wet season, you've got a dry season, so like there are certain weeks when you can't drink. Um, and so just creating that discipline, creating that balance actually helped them with their course load. So, we talked about balance earlier on. We talked about like how it could be more work. In some ways, it actually can help you build discipline to get through it.
Oh yeah. No, it definitely can.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I think that's it. So everyone, thank you so much for joining. Jenny, thank you so much for
Yeah.
investing the time. I know it's late. And yeah, and so for those who'd like to contact us, reach out. And then for those current families of ours who are interested in pursuing the or learning more about the athletic recruiting path, like reach out to your consultant and we can totally get you in touch with Jenny. So awesome. Thanks so much. Have a great night.